Hi guys and welcome. This is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, artist, memoir writer, bipolar psychiatric survivor, and your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast, the place that offers an alternative perspective on mental illness, highlighting creativity, non-conventional healing, and breaking on through to the other side. If you are ready for a new narrative on the mental realm that celebrates crazy and cool without penalty, then Not As Crazy As You Think is for you. Hello, this is Jen Gaeta Siciliano, your host of Not As Crazy As You Think podcast. So happy to say that we have an awesome guest once again. Her name is Kellie Gillespie. She's a sculptural artist and a mental health advocate who holds an MFA from Rinehart School of Sculpture at Maryland Institute College of Art. Kellie's focus is around mental health and mental illness, which is what we do here on Not As Crazy As You Think. So I'm so psyched that she was willing to come on board and talk about what concepts she loves to focus on in her sculptures, which is recovery and survivorship. So thank you so much, Kellie, for coming on board and sharing your story. It means so much to me.
Thanks, Jen. I'm really, really happy to be here. I'm really stoked to have this conversation, and I think it's incredibly relevant. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, it really is relevant because, as you know, today, everyone is experiencing something, and it's finally coming out that we can discuss it, right? Without the shame.
Absolutely.
So that's what's so beautiful about your art. It's so open, honest. You're an incredible sculptor. I mean, we're going to get into all the specifics, but I think I want to introduce how I discovered you, which was through your latest sculpture, which is an installation piece, which is becoming very popular online. It's going a bit viral, and it's about, you collecting from 1,000 people, I understand, over the course of 2 years, 4,800 prescription bottles. And you title the installation piece Medicated. Now, is it under medicated? Like, I know that you throw that in there.
Yeah, so it's over medicated, under medicated, but it's a play on words, kind of how it's written out.
So tell us a little bit about this work. I know that your main thing was to, have people come together without the shame, talking about how they are dealing with their own mental illness or how they connect to this is very, very visceral and very deep. So what was overall this experience like, collecting the bottles, having people support you? Tell us.
Yeah, absolutely. So this piece is the accumulation of about, like you said, 4,800 prescription bottles, donated, I would say, approximately by 1,000 people over the course of a 2-year span, from pretty much all over the country, but specifically mostly in the Baltimore region, which I was residing in. And honestly, the piece began just as an exploration in materiality. It's kind of how my work has its basis in using objects discarded by society as it parallels people discarded by society. So most of my work really starts with a material and a deep dive and an exploration of that item. And so I knew prescription bottles was something I really wanted to kind of work with. I think, there's this really strong symbolism and it's kind of controversial right now. And so, I just reached out to my community and I asked for donations. And honestly, I don't think I even knew what a community based project it was going to become. And it was unintentionally this way for all of us to work towards something together, especially during the pandemic. And, it gave something for my community to kind of join in together with. So I accumulated so many bottles and, so many people reached out and shared their stories with me. And to be honest, I really had no idea what I was going to be doing with them, but that's kind of how my work works. Is I work in a kind of retrograde process. I start with a material and let the work organically manifest. And so, this piece, it was honestly, it was so surreal having so many people's stories and, little parts of their experiences come together in this, unified structure.
It's amazing. I mean, now when they sent you these bottles, did they share stories and stuff?
Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. What you are essentially doing is allowing art to heal because, these people are looking to tell their stories, and not everybody is a big mouth like me. You know what I mean? Like telling my story on my podcast, whatever. But, it's like a lot of people are all pent up. They need to express their own truth, their own story. And you allowed all these people to do that and to feel like, wow, I'm part of this project now. I mean, I think it's very, very empowering. How did you rally so many people behind the cause? I mean, was there a certain strategy that you had where you reached out to a certain group of people? Like, how did you get people to send this stuff to you?
Yeah. So honestly, I think it was more so a lot of happenstances of chance. It started with word of mouth. I, just posted on social media that I was collecting bottles. And then I reached out on this Facebook page that was based in my community and, made a flyer, put some up around my school and set up this drop-off bin in front of my house in Baltimore. So even people who weren't aware of what was going on, there was this nice little bucket with some kind of parameters on it, and people would walk by and want to contribute. And so slowly and surely every day people would come and drop off bottles, and it just kind of word of mouth spread. And I think it's something we all, or a majority of us, have access to. It's something we offer away. And so everyone, either had some stored or over the course of 2 years was like, oh, I can donate to this person that I know is collecting. And Baltimore is also one of those areas where everything's kind of in walking distance. Mm-hmm. So it was super easy for people to, just go on a walk and come by and drop off.
That's great.
Yeah.
What's good about your Instagram page, and tell the audience your Instagram page so that they could, the art one particularly, because you have so much there. So how could they follow you?
Sure. My Instagram handle is kellie.gillespie.art, KELLIE.GILLESPIE.art.
Definitely check it out, people, because it's stunning. And I also love how you incorporate small videos of how you create this stuff. I love how it's so industrial what you do. It's like you have what do you call that with the the thing on your
welding.
Welding. I mean, this girl is too much. Like, I love it. And with the prescription bottles, I noticed that you were slicing. You ended up deciding to make those slices, which I thought was such an interesting way to like really increase the material because I mean, it's like now you have just like endless little rings. What made you decide to make that choice?
So this idea that repetition kind of acts as a way to symbolize this labor-intensive, kind of monotonous, somewhat torturous process is really important for my own practice and my own kind of mental well-being. It's really my own therapy, and taking an object and repeating it over and over and over again kind of
is it like self-soothing?
It's incredibly self-soothing, and you don't necessarily need to understand my personal narrative to kind of be able to, find your own meaning in my work. But to understand kind of some of my previous history is to understand a deeper connection between art and mental health.
Yes.
And so for someone who's struggled specifically with self-harm and, addictive, very self-destructive habits, art became a way for me to kind of scratch that itch through these labor-intensive, kind of painful, torturous processes that result in something beautiful rather than, self-destructive.
Yeah.
But somehow kind of, having myself sit there and cut these prescription bottles, for hours and hours on ends and connecting them with what I believe was 35,000 zip ties. Like there is a sort of mindset that goes into that. It's a little, not everyone would have, the mental capability to sit there and kind of do that to themselves. So I think there's something that is so important about my process and why it is really incredibly important for me to document, each specific movement to really hone in that, the work I'm doing, I think has such a detrimental meaning. And so for myself, the labor put into the work needs to hold that same value. To make something, that is simple and easy to kind of just put together, I think it's a disservice to this, heavy topic of mental health. So to, kind of strain myself and really push myself to, almost a breaking point to produce a work, I think is so crucial in embedding this deep meaning of what the work really is.
Absolutely. There's something going on with these pieces. They're so dynamic. They're so energy filled. Like, you just know what that process work that you're doing is directly linked to how these things are coming out. I believe in the tortured artist. I don't know. I believe in the soul of the tortured artist. I believe that, like, there's a lot of artists who do struggle with issues with mental.
Absolutely.
I don't like to say illness. I say distress, mental distress.
Mm-hmm.
And if we learned early on how to embrace that, and even for those people who aren't like maybe in their most essential state born an artist,
Mm-hmm.
they learned artistic processes, more so in schools and everything, because now they're cutting the arts like crazy.
Right.
It would be so healing. I mean, I just I'm very moved by how you mention how art has personally saved your life.
Absolutely.
So, and it shows that now you are out there creating the art and saving others. You know what I mean? I mean that very directly, because for those people who are, concerned that they don't have the strength to have these open conversations, the art that you do is allowing that conversation to be had. And it's beyond important. I hope that you realize how important it is. One of the things that you mentioned in describing how you use like these everyday found and forgotten objects, and it's not just like the prescription bottles, you've done this in many, many other projects as well.
Absolutely.
I'm going to read your statement.
Okay.
My incorporation of mundane, undervalued materials explores the symbolism in that which is neglected and disregarded as it pertains to those labeled by society as unworthy or damaged. Now, I just love that, because you are speaking for many of us. We have felt that we were cast away. And by making sure that these objects are like preserved in these beautiful forms, it's like you are giving voice to that too. So can you speak a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I mentioned briefly earlier this parallel between things discarded by society and people discarded by society, and kind of this idea that using materials that are mundane every day really aren't given much notoriety as beautiful, important objects, and kind of using that methodology of repeating it to a point where it transcends the traditional, idea of beauty, and kind of paralleling people who are considered worthless, broken, not valuable members of society, and kind of realizing that those people, if given the chance, can amount to more than the sum of their worth and really be the people that make the biggest impact, and can and will, if given the chance. I am the queen of dumpster diving. Love finding materials on the street, and I'm not the least bit shameful about it, because I think there's something really beautiful about an object that has a previous life, that has another story, and kind of bringing objects together that you would never really consider to be even quote unquote art, right?
Mm-hmm.
We've talked about the prescription bottles, but I've done pieces, with these little salad cups that I dug out of a dumpster.
Yeah. Let's talk about that one. That's called Scarred, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So share a little bit about that subject matter. I mean, that's heavy. That's very heavy. Yeah. And there was a big, I guess, resurgence of eating disorder activity during and after the pandemic.
Absolutely.
Was this done before that?
Yes, this was done 2017. And again, most of my work comes from a personal place, and then, is brought in to kind of relate to other people's experiences. But essentially, I was working catering in San Francisco in college, and these beautiful little plastic cups were used to present salads in one, night at dinner. And they're these green kind of warped cups that I then dug out of the dumpster and brought home. And I, very purposely sat there and rinsed out every single one and washed it. And this, connotation of watching food go down the drain and having to, work with this residue. I took these cups and then I broke them in half, melted them, and restitched them back together. And, it's this, personally, I was, talking about this idea of binging and purging and bulimia and like the scars and the burning that happens interior to the body that isn't really shown on the exterior. And so I took these cups with their beautiful sutures and ended up creating this entire wall that, cascaded in the exact mapping and replica of the scars on my thighs. Wow. And when the light hit it, you had these beautiful shadows that were casted for something that was completely destroyed and, resutured together. And this idea that something broken and devalued literally from the trash, became this extraordinary, beautiful, transcendent object.
Yes. You also worked with snow cones and nails, and the wine corks are very interesting. Yes. And you did mention the scars on your legs. Now, I know that you also have a casting of this, a bronze casting, which I have to tell you, it's very moving because you're just so honest and open about this. When you put that out there, I mean, how did your audience react?
I was actually blown away by how many people have reached out to me over the years. Because I was that kid in high school. I had, horrible self-harm scars that were just in the beginning healing stages. And, I was playing volleyball and wearing shorts. And, I'm not really sure what my intention was at the time, but I've had so many people reach out to me and kind of thank me in a way for never really hiding them. And so I think that reaction initially has given me the strength to be able to share, what once was, my biggest insecurity and the thing I was most, ashamed of. And I let it kind of be my biggest asset. And I think I'm so fortunate to be in a place where I can share my story and I can talk about it. Because I don't think that's the case for a lot of individuals, if not most. And so I think in that capacity, that's why I find it so important to be so open and transparent, because I really do find it the strength in sharing and talking about these subjects is really the biggest way we're going to start to overcome the stigma surrounding, mental health, mental illness. And yeah, so like I said, most of my work is from a personal narrative. And so the piece you're talking about, Preserved, is this bronze casting of my thigh, which remarkably picked up every single goosebump and, mark and, took my biggest insecurity and preserved it in bronze, which is the longest lasting material. And, it's something that'll be, around way longer than me. And kind of right. That, beautiful symbolism in preserving what, I was so scared to ever really talk about. And it almost became a superpower in a way.
Yes.
And so, yeah. And, self-harm is definitely one of my biggest struggles, or it was. And so that, comes through a lot in my work. But I think that's why my work is also very abstract. And I think there's an importance there because even though as we're sitting here talking about it, and I'm being very specific about, the methodologies and the concepts that went into the work, the actual resulting piece is abstract enough to a point where people can really, place their own stories behind it and get what they need to get from it versus, me being being an artist, not that there's anything wrong, but that is very succinct and, puts these experiences in a very small box that not everyone can penetrate.
Yes.
So that's why I think that abstraction is so crucial to what I do. Because everyone is able to get what they need to get from it.
And you've managed to do this. You managed to do this really, really well. And there's this thematic thing that you honestly, you don't even have to know the theme. You could just appreciate the abstract art. But once you know the theme, like then you can start inserting, you know what I mean? Yourself into it, which is, it's so great. It's really, really accessible. Many people can relate. There's another one I found to be very interesting. Your work, Burdens They Wear.
So absolutely. So the series you're talking about, Burdens They Wear, is this idea of taking everyday found clothing, my own stuff off the street, and embroidering these very visceral and explicit mental health statements into them. And it's kind of this sarcastic play on, you know, when you go into sorry, maybe I shouldn't say a brand, but when you go into
who cares? Doesn't matter.
Okay. I didn't know. When you go into a hip store and you see these embroidered texts, which are all the rage right now, and it says, "Life is so beautiful. The sun is shining. You know, I have a smile on today," et cetera, and kind of taking that and playing with this idea that we don't ever really explicitly wear what we're actually feeling sometimes. And so the piece actually began with my old uniform skirt. I went to private school and had a uniform and all, and I took the statement, "I was wearing this when you raped me," and sat there and embroidered it into the top half of the skirt that I actually was wearing when I was assaulted in high school. And it started as a very personal kind of venture, and I don't think I even knew it was ever going to become an art piece of itself. It was something I was doing to kind of work through something, and it ended up kind of expanding into this entire series of clothing that embroidered, you know, statements such as, "I am the same person I was before you found out I had a mental disorder," or something like, "I just need to cry one more time, then I'll be good, promise." These kind of just very honest and visceral statements. Sometimes I can't tell if my body belongs to me. And to put them in the context of a quote unquote pop-up shop, which is what my initial intention was, really breaks that boundary between clothing and identity, and the change from, you know, soft, happy statements to almost ones of political nature. And so they have been in multiple galleries at this point. And I think it's this piece that actually borders on this line of craft and fine art, and it kind of falls somewhere in between. And it's for that reason I think the work is so successful, because it's not something you necessarily would classify as sculpture, is these clothings on a rack, but in that same way, what it does functionally does cross that threshold into conceptual art.
Yeah, definitely high conceptual art. I love it. This is one of my favorites. Give me reasons to stay alive. You know, I mean, like, these things are so real. I love it because how you described it with what's really going on inside and what we wear on the outside. These are two different things. You know, when I was not doing well, you know, many times, I was dying inside. And that, what do people say when the first thing that they say when they say, "Oh, how you doing?" You know, especially if you had some kind of mental illness label, then it would be like, lie, lie, lie.
Yeah.
Nobody really wants to hear the truth. But this is so wonderful because it's just so out there. And then it says it all. You know what I mean? It's really, really brave.
Right. And that's where the name Burdens They Wear kind of comes into play. 'Cause I think a lot of us, you know, really struggle with asking for help or sharing that we're not doing okay because of the fear of being a burden. And there's this quote, I believe it's by an unknown author, but it says, "You are not a burden, you have a burden," which by definition is too heavy to carry on your own.
Nice.
And I think that is a really succinct way of saying that we're kind of all in this together. And my struggles are just as relevant as your struggles, and it's okay to talk about them, and you're not a burden. And that's something I'm even, you know, working on continuously. But yeah, and I mean, it is one of those pieces that, you know, definitely breaks that threshold of abstract art and kind of goes into something more literal. And it is the only work I've probably done that I was actually able to take home and work on, which was so crucial during the pandemic. It was the first thing, you know, I could sit and work and do on the road because I was going back and forth from Baltimore to Los Angeles at the time, and not doing okay myself. So not being able to get to the studio ended up being okay because I could, stay in bed and just embroider and kind of work through it that way.
Yeah, yeah. It's great. Everyone check this out. Burdens they wear. Help me, please. I'm so sad. It's getting harder to breathe. I just love them. I mean, I don't know. Do you ever think about licensing any of this stuff?
I've actually been working with an industrial embroidery machine the past 2 years, kind of following suit and putting together an entire line of clothing in a sense. Yeah. And
That's
so
great.
I've been working on, getting an inventory ready, and that is something I will be pursuing pretty soon.
Wow.
So
because it's cool. I mean, it shows that it's cool to talk about. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like I could see people responding really, really positively to it. I mean, not just as an art piece, but something wearable art,
Yeah, exactly.
So, wow, that's great. Another piece that I thought was really interesting, and I guess this comes to my fascination with you with the welding equipment. You did two pieces, Reconnected and Connected. How can I say this? It's like to see you in that role, it's very satisfying to me because I teach art. And I guess that speaks a lot to your process, you know what I mean? Like taking it and being repetitive about it. But you're welding all of these nails together. And it comes out beautiful. And I understand one of them, I don't know if both were, but was commissioned. It was one commissioned from the other.
One was commissioned from the other.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about that project?
Yeah, absolutely. So honestly, I think it was probably the largest undertaking of a project at the time that I had done. It was actually for this it's called Commencement. And it was the sculpture projects that went around Sonoma State, which was my undergrad, that would be up for a few days to a week. So somewhat small kind of projects that would be placed around campus. And I'm not sure what took over me, but I decided to do a 12-foot sculpture welded entirely out of nails. And so, I mean, it was actually the first piece that I came to understand how important repetition was in my work. And this idea that a singular item multiplied, repetitively, plays into this theory of, something amounting to more than some of its worth, like I mentioned before. But there's also something about welding that I personally love because it's such a physical and physically demanding kind of exercise. And there's something honestly kind of badass about it, which I love. And this idea that, there's this, stereotypical kind of umbrella over, women especially. And I honestly, I love hearing people come up to me like, oh, you don't look like a welder. And I love being able to say that I'm breaking what people think is the norm. And it's also, I have dabbled with painting and printmaking as well, but there's something about being physical with the work that is so important to me. And the piece you're talking about, so it's Connected and Reconnected. The first piece is about 10,000 nails, and the second is about 15 to 16,000. And I think it's safe to say I never want to see another nail as long as I live. But the piece is this, kind of play with an object, a mundane object that is so important to every structure. Nails are the foundation of and building blocks of pretty much everything, but you go into a garage or see a rusty nail in the street and you really don't give it a second glance. Like it's just a nail, they're everywhere. And so it kind of breaks a perspective by taking this, item, which has such significant symbolic value, and, really reframing the narrative. And so this piece ended up sitting on my campus for about 3 weeks and then going to a gallery, and then was purchased by Somo Village, which is a all encompassing living facility. It's, an entertainment, business, live, Center in Rinehart Park.
It's amazing.
Yeah, California.
This was from your college?
Yeah.
I mean, this is how good you are. You realize that?
Oh my gosh. It's hard to wrap my head around. I think I feel lucky to be able to even have had the means to do it, and the support, because this is what really started me working in the studio at absurd hours. And I spend, when I'm really deep in a piece, anywhere to 100 to 140 hours a week working in my studio, which is a little absurd. But there's something about that I think really kind of signifies how important this work is for me. And that's kind of where it all starts, is this idea that, I'm so fortunate to be able to do what I do. I'm so lucky to be able to do the thing I love and talk about mental health and the stigma surrounding mental illness. And I'm so lucky to have a platform in which I can use to kind of talk about these things. I'm really fortunate that my story has given me a purpose, and that, art ended up saving my life. So yeah, I think that piece is when something clicked in me, like, oh crap, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. In this kind of existential moment of like, I either do this or I do nothing at all.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and then I was commissioned by a law firm in San Francisco to do another piece, which is what I did the entire year between my undergrad and grad.
Oh wow.
And so that is up in San Francisco. Yeah, and it really for myself personally was like this, again, like holy cow moment of, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I honestly, at the time, I was a junior in my undergrad and was really planning on studying art therapy and going that route with my career. And I had that moment of, wow, I'm not really done making art for myself yet, but I'm also understanding and realizing I'm making an impact with what I'm doing just as much as I would studying, art therapy. And it is something I do hope to pursue in the future down the road. But that piece was that pivotal moment in my own career of like, wow, this is everything I want and more. And I, for me, if I can help one person, if I can, save one life, that's all I can really ever ask for. And I don't know how to exist without, this topic. My mental health is so important, period, but it is my life.
Right.
But it's not only my life, it's so many people's lives.
Right.
And, you even mentioned it, being someone when you were going through this, tumultuous time, no one was talking about it.
Right.
And this idea of feeling so alone in your struggle that you must be, completely crazy to be going through what you're going through. And if I can help one person never feel that, then my life is kind of complete in a way.
Oh my gosh, totally. I mean, you, in a way, just from me to you, you are fortunate that you're still able to access your talents, because, with my situation, this was, remember, I mean, almost 30 years ago. Okay. So these medications were different then. But the ones were on were so debilitating that I wasn't able to paint. I went to school for painting. So I wasn't able to paint for 10 years because it didn't jive with me. And then when I finally switched over and got on different medication, I was able to connect again to my art talent. But, that's in our DNA. And when you have that in your DNA, yes, there might be something in you or blocking. Some people just can't reach inspiration. But in my case, it was stopping that area of where my creativity would have bloomed. And if you can't do that, I'm going to say to you, my 20s were devastating because I wasn't able to do the thing that would have saved me, you know what I mean? Which was my art. So now, it's a different world for me too. I mean, I was able, when I finally did switch to better medication, I was able to then access that, and then like my whole world changed. So my I guess my overall like point to that is that, you know, you've been through a lot, and yet you're so like on your way to like being this major spokesperson in art, in recovery, and it's so wonderful because it's the story that everyone needs to hear, that it's possible, right? Recovery is possible. Yes, it's a lifelong journey. Some of us are more sensitive, and we're going to be, I tend to think that artists generally have high levels of emotion. So, but that's what helps us do this. Like who's going to be putting these nails together if you don't? I mean, somebody's got to be that person for our society. And that's why it's great, because you definitely in your art, it's all about the mental health. If people really think about like abstract sculpture, like how does that communicate? But you do it, and it's extraordinary. So I just say to you, please keep doing what you're doing, because it's the message that everyone who's struggling needs to hear. And you are representing that energy, that spirit, that vision that is going to remind people that it's possible. They can, struggles happen, life, and that's, I think, the beauty about the new conversations today, which is we're all going through it. You know what I mean? We all got mental problems. I mean, it's true. That's the human condition. You know what I mean? So we and that's why the pandemic, and I'm telling you, this was only a couple years ago, and you're so young, but I'm so old. And I'm thinking the pandemic changed everything for me. And I think for many people, because people were like, oh, like, I'm struggling and I don't know why. And then, so people who normally never struggled, because I think that some of us have a disposition towards struggle in that way. But, and I do believe it has to do with like maybe our purpose in life, what I mean? Like doing this kind of thing. So, but some people who were always found life to be okay and easy and whatever, because maybe they fit in well, or maybe that, whatever. All of a sudden the world changed, and it was just like, oh my God. So the world has changed since then. People are feeling less shame. And it's a beautiful thing, because you're just starting out and you're just gonna fly with it. Now, one of the things that you mentioned to me last time we talked was that you're off to Europe soon. Do you have a art gig over there, or are you doing some kind of installation piece?
Yeah. So I am heading off to Europe for about 2 months. It started more as this, I just graduated from, my master's program, and I have the ability to travel. And this idea of traveling alone and really discovering yourself. And I think it was this important milestone that I'm going to be taking in my own mental journey of really sitting with myself and, putting myself in a new country, a new culture, not a single person I know. And I think that's the moment when someone can really discover who they are. That being said, it is, blissfully lined up that, I was offered a couple art opportunities out there. So I have some things happening in Madrid and Berlin and hopefully London, which is like, it's everything is so surreal to me right now. So I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around it, but I will be out there for 2 months. And then I come back to Los Angeles and have some commission pieces I'm working on and some other projects. And then I start an artist residency in Baltimore in June. Wow. And then the wheel keeps on turning. Yeah.
Absolutely. You are, maybe I should have gotten into sculpture.
It's so funny because I'm sitting here and I'm like, God, I wish I could paint.
What are you talking about? Your paintings are beautiful.
Yeah, but I don't know. There's something, I think it's interesting that you just mentioned a few moments ago that, there was this time period which you felt like you couldn't create.
Yeah. And,
I went through, I don't want to say similar because our experiences are obviously their own, but during the pandemic, everything got switched to online. And this
Oh,
is a concept of, studying sculpture online.
yeah,
It didn't go
true.
over too well. And so I was actually living in a basement in Baltimore, where if I stood on my tippy toes, my head hit the ceiling.
Oh, wow.
I had no windows, I had no light. And so I spent a year, going through it. And it's honestly the basis of that prescription bottle piece, bringing it full circle of, I think I was on about 8 different medications within, a 10-month span. And I was
Wow.
not doing okay.
Yeah.
And I really, found it hard to get out of bed, to even do some of that embroidery work. So I think there was something to be said about going from that, which honestly was only, a year and a half ago, to now being able to go and see the world and kind of,
Oh,
get out of that. And I'm a little, I'm slightly traumatized. I will never be anywhere where there's no sunlight again, because that seriously, had major implications on me. But yeah, and I just kind of wanted to touch base on that. But yeah, I feel really fortunate that I have this opportunity and I'm going to travel. I mean, I don't know any other time in my life where I can just pick up and leave
yeah.
and backpack
This is the
through
time
Europe.
to
So
do it. Absolutely.
yeah,
Especially if you have an opportunity with your work, with your
yeah,
artwork.
absolutely.
You know what I mean? Like that's huge because it's in the end, the beauty of being an artist is that we do direct how we want to live. If you do it as, if you full out do it, which you're doing. And I just want to like state again to anybody who's listening, who's thinking about getting into art, because I tell my students, there's jobs out there now. Like back in the day, there weren't that many jobs. Not that everybody's going to like maybe do this, but, they could go into animation or graphic art.
Mm-hmm.
These things, like even in my day, there weren't in any courses, that many courses in this stuff. CGI wasn't even a thing then. You know what I mean? When I went to
Yeah.
school. So I think in fact, I was in school. This is how old I am. I was in school during Beauty and the Beast when that came out, that animation film. And that was the first CGI film, believe it or not, that used computers to show that it was like a 5-second ending.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember we were having this big discussion in class because we were learning animation, but like doing it with the books, the flip books.
Mm-hmm.
So, and everyone was discussing this is not the way of the future. This will probably end here. The cells were just going on, the Disney cells that, were the pictures of the animation. They were starting to go on like major sale because everyone was like getting rid of the whole industry was just like deciding to stop. And I was like, what? Like, I don't understand. But, there's other things out there. So I guess you're inspiring me a lot because I have to go back to teaching my classes in October. And I'm just like, remembering like that back in my day, nobody wanted to get into the arts because we felt like we couldn't make a difference. Mm-hmm. What advice do you have for the person who is struggling with finding their own purpose? Because it seems to me that you have found your purpose. And I think that really lends to a healing of mental distress. I feel like, if we all started our lives with that idea instead of saying, how am I going to make money? Rather, how am I going to find purpose? We could probably alleviate a lot of stresses along the way. So for those who are either artists or creatives or just anyone who is trying to figure out how to find their purpose, what can you say about that in terms of, trusting the process? Because you seem to have found your way in the world.
Yeah, I mean, again, I guess I want to preface that I feel so extraordinarily lucky that, I was able to find this outlet, and not only find it, but find it at the exact moment I needed to. I'm also incredibly fortunate to have had parents, that supported my every move with this, and, were okay with their child, going and studying art. But honestly, I think there is something to say about what you just mentioned about the way society works, that we need to find a way to make money. And, this financial reasoning is, the striving motivator,
Yeah.
But I guess what I would have to say is like, to anyone who's struggling, to find the thing you love. It doesn't matter if it's art. It doesn't matter if it's riding horses. It doesn't matter if it's, darts or, playing with cats. Who cares? There's something out there for everyone that makes us feel the sense of like tingly love and just like allows us to kind of forget everything else. And like when you find that one thing, snatch it, grab it. Don't think about, oh, how am I going to make a living off this? How am I going to survive? You will figure it out. But there is something to be said about finding something that makes you feel like nothing else and the importance of not letting that go. And, in my case, yeah, it is art. And it's this absurd little, passageway of sculpting that somehow magically I feel like found me. And if I had listened to all the people that told me I was never going to make a career off this, I would honestly, I don't even know if I would be here right now. Yeah. And I am so glad that, I am a stubborn individual that said, no, this is what I love and I'm going to find a way to do it. And I mean, I'm sure it sounds all easy breezy. I'm an artist and I'm doing it, but there is so much struggle in that. And I embroider on the side. That's how I pay my bills. Right. I also teach, I pick up welding jobs here and there, and it's all this little nook though, where I get to scratch this creative itch. Yes. And so, yeah, I think when you find the thing that makes you feel most alive, like you don't let it go.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. These are great words of advice from someone who's so young. I love it. I mean, I don't mean to, but really, you're highly accomplished as an artist for your age. Like it is striking because, you've done fellowships and you've done, all these residencies, and like, that's not for everyone right outside of school. You know what I mean? Like it's really great to, talk with someone like you because it inspires me endlessly because I'm just like, oh my gosh, like I just want to get out there. And I was painting all day yesterday because I'm doing a few shows in Bushwick coming up. And I was just like, oh my God, I only got a couple weeks. And then and then I started looking at your stuff and I was just like, I better not complain because this girl is putting one nail after another, sticking them together. I mean, like, like it's that kind of, and let me speak to that before I let you go. I find this to be very interesting that, we haven't talked about this because we don't need to, there's much more to talk about with your art, but the idea that we're broken, that when you get labeled, you're then broken, you're, could be thrown out of society or whatever. What you do takes so much mental strength that it's really opposite. And that's what I feel like I'm always trying to push out there as a mental health advocate myself, saying we're the special ones because we're actually allowing ourselves to see and to awaken and to engage with this crazy world. It's not that we're necessarily the crazy ones. We just see more sometimes. So there's that burden with that, and because you feel a lot of it and you feel the craziness in the world and sometimes it's hard to just even want to, experience life. But I love your advice if you find something that really makes you tingly inside, you got to hold on to that. So it's great advice. It's great wisdom. And I wish you all the best of luck in Europe. I hope it goes so well and all, some wonderful things happen there for you. Maybe we could talk again after you're all done and see what work you've done.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much.
Oh my gosh, definitely. And please give to our listeners your contact information where they can follow you on your social media and your website.
Yeah, absolutely. So my website is www.kelliegillespie.com. That's Kellie with an IE, Gillespie. And my Instagram handle is at kellie.gillespie.art.
Awesome. All right, Kellie, thank you so much for gracing us with your presence.
Well, thank you so much for having me. This has been absolutely incredible.
Of course. Thank you. Thanks for listening to Not As Crazy As You Think, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. And remember, mental health is attainable for anyone, especially those labeled with mental illness. Until next time, peace out.